This is the Leadership Podcast, and we study leaders. This is episode 490, featuring Katie Lefkowitz, founder of Harken Foods. Thank you for joining us today. This is Jim Vasilopoulos, founder of Rafty Advisors, and this is the Leadership Podcast.
Hey everybody, Jan Rutherford here, founder of Self-Reliant Leadership. Thanks for making us part of your day as we study leaders once again. And you know where to get all our evergreen content. It's at theleadershippodcast.com.
Yeah. And this episode is broadly brought to you by our sponsor, Darley. Wonderful company with wonderful people. They're trusted by warfighters and firefighters since 1908. Darley is a dedicated company that equips our military and first responders with the essential tools they need for mission success, from fuel and firefighting pumps to drones and tactical solutions. Discover more about this incredible company and the people who serve our nation's heroes at Darley.com. That's DARLEY.com. Darley, you serve others, we serve you.
And our guest today is Katie Lefkowitz. She's the founder and CEO of Harken Foods and former COO of Caulipower, a biopharma exec turned food entrepreneur. She's reinventing candy with health and joy at its core. Her mission to allow all people to love candy again. Katie, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Really looking forward to it. Thank you for having me.
Good. Well, Jim and I were just talking this morning. We're like, we need to get more, entrepreneurs and people running companies on the show. We have lots of authors and military and sports. And so we're really, really glad to have you on. So before we get into everything, we always ask our guests, what's not in the public bio?
Gosh, I mean, so much. I think, honestly, first and foremost, and it's kind of funny that it never is in the public bio, I'm a new mom. I have a nearly 1.5-year-old at home who is a tiny little tyrant that runs my life, whom I love dearly, but it's been just the most amazing piece of this journey is he was born right around the same time that I launched Harken into retail. So, I have my two babies that are kind of growing up next to each other.
Oh, wow. Well, I have a grandson who's about a year old, and it reminded me how hard it is. I mean, watching from a distance, it's like, oh, I forgot. I forgot. It's a lot. So good on you. Good on you. Well, they say, do parents make the babies, the kids, or do kids make the parents? So that'll be something to figure out, I think.
So far, I think it's 50-50, but I'll keep you posted.
Okay. Well, let's kind of dig in. You went from studying neuroscience at Penn to leading companies in the CPG space. I'm wondering how your background in science influenced how you build a business and make all the decisions that entrepreneurs need to make.
Yeah, it's a great question. Honestly, for me, studying neuroscience, studying science in the way that I did, it really taught me an appreciation for the scientific method. So apart from the actual practical skills that have actually really helped me in building food brands, I think just that belief in whether it's the scientific method or another method, but anything that helps elucidate the truth of questions that we have every day and try and evaluate them in a way that's less emotional and more based on, what information we're really seeing and trying to reduce bias, honestly, as much as possible. Has been a big piece that I've taken from that kind of scientific education forward into different leadership roles.
Yeah. We had a guest, Jim, you'll remember the name. He wrote a book called Everybody Lies. He was a Google analyst. Jim, what was his name?
Was that Seth Stevens-Davidowitz or something like that?
Yes, that was it. And anyway, what I remember, he was one of our earliest guests we ever had on, and he said, I don't understand why companies and leaders don't do A/B testing. Like, you talked about scientific method, and normally people look at it and they go, well, I've decided this, and the whole company and the whole pot is going to go into this. Is there something that you're doing with your decisions that is similar to A/B testing or something with the scientific method that you could describe for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think all decisions just need to be based in data and not necessarily, stories. I think another piece of that too is I really do seek feedback from every single person on the Harken team. And don't just say that. I think a lot of people say that and then they're not actually open to hearing it. And that's the way I try to get around, again, this just inherent bias we have in any hierarchical organization, right? You're never really going to want to tell your boss like what you truly think unless they're forcing you to, because so many people are trained to kind of keep that down. And that's how they've advanced at other companies. So, I mean, I tell everybody reports to me, I'm like, if you're not telling me I'm doing something wrong or questioning what I'm doing very frequently, I'm going to have a problem with that because there's no way that I'm doing everything right. So I really like demand almost the feedback from you, and really encourage it when I see it happening.
Yep. Yeah, earlier in the year we interviewed Nick Cooney, who is kind enough to introduce us to you, and we really appreciate that. And we had a nice conversation back then, Katie. And I was really struck by the kind of story you told about, let's say, the beginning of Harken. And like, because I thought it was really interesting that there was like this emotional component to it. Then there was also this really scientific component to it, which was like, okay, I'm trying to solve a problem here as well. I think it's worth sharing that story a little bit because I think it's really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just to go back to how did a nice gal like me wind up selling candy bars for a living? This was never the plan. And really Harken was created out of a need for myself. So I had a health scare related to colon cancer. And it was a real eye opener for me personally. It introduced me to this whole universe of food as medicine, which was completely foreign to me at the time. And, I grew up on all sorts of junk food. Snickers was always my go-to. And after receiving this information and really wanting to change it, I was like, what can I do to make my favorite candy bar actually really good for you and good for your gut? Because the big guys certainly aren't going to focus their time and money and energy on doing that. And so I created it in my kitchen the very first time and loved it. I fed it to friends who loved it. And I thought, there's really something here. And I can't possibly be the only person having this challenge, right? I used to love candy. I can't eat it for X, Y, and Z reasons. Let's give people a better option.
Yeah. So, you had your experience with Caulipower, and then you kind of come up with this need to create Harken. Is there anything that like changed, like iteration 1 to iteration 2? Like, what did you learn? You're clearly an analytical person who, takes feedback and processes it. Like, how did that help you with your journey, what you learned at Caulipower, and what did you do the same? How'd that help you? What you might do differently?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the Caulipower journey was such a fantastic one. I mean, a good piece of this, right, is luck, right? We were in the right place, the right product at the right time. And we really grew at the time. We were the fastest growing brand in all of CPG, not just food, but all of CPG. And I think we did a lot of stuff right. You don't get to that place without doing a lot right. To be honest with you, though, I feel that the pace of growth, while it worked for Caulipower, is something that for me in beginning Harken, I want to be probably a little bit more measured. And honestly, that comes down to who I am as a leader, how I want to structure the business financially, how the financial markets have been. I'm probably a little less of the, oh my gosh, let's blow everything out at all costs. I want to your point, be very measured. Step, is this working? If it is, keep going. If it's not working, what do we need to fix? So that's, I think, a big differentiator. But really at the core of it, at Caulipower, we were reinventing a comfort food with superfoods. And really, I mean, the thesis of Harken is rooted in the exact same thing from a product standpoint.
Yeah. Do you think that had you not had like the experience, the success of blowing something up and like, hey, we nailed it, that you might have like wanted to do the same with Harken? Or do you think that because it was just a much more personal, intimate passion or purpose that you're like, I need to treat this differently?
It's a great question. I'm not sure. I think having the success that we did with Caulipower definitely gave me the confidence. So I don't know, had we not had that, would I have really had the confidence to go at it alone? That being said, I think the purpose that I get from doing this every day, even if we hadn't been as successful, I'm sure it'd be inside of me. I don't know that I would have the confidence to get it out, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So Katie, you've been named a big honor, Inc. top female founder. What have you learned about leading in industries where female founders are still underrepresented? And what advice would you have for people that really want to move to be an entrepreneur, be they men or women, people breaking into leadership roles?
I reflect on this a lot, especially about, my early days, especially entering into a new industry of the food industry from biotech before. And it actually comes back to what we were just talking about is I think in the early days, I was almost trying to be what I thought a leader looked like, talked like, behaved. And quite frankly, I was insecure. I mean, I was very insecure in particular about my age, about my gender. It's a very male dominated industry. And I think that's where different underrepresented groups in a particular industry get caught up is they're trying to fit a mold that they frankly shouldn't be trying to fit. And when you're just yourself, it actually comes off much more authentic. And it's those relationships that you're holding yourself back from if you're not able to be your full self. So like one example is, I was very insecure about my age. And at the time I was getting married and, most of the people I was interacting with, partnering with were much older. And I wouldn't even tell them that I was getting married because I didn't want to, highlight the fact that I was at a younger or an earlier life stage than they were. And it's just so funny because how many relationships did I miss out on by not bringing my full self to the table? And that would really be my biggest piece of advice is like, have confidence in yourself, own who you are, and it'll actually take you much further than trying to fit into some mold.
Was there a moment, in time where you went, I deserve to be here. I'm the best person for the job. I'm like, no more imposter syndrome, no more insecurity. Was there a moment where you're like, damn, I need to get out of my own way?
I think there will always be a little bit of that there for anybody in any role, right? Like, unless you have complete narcissism, there's always going to be a little bit of you that's worried about that. But I don't know. It's something about Harken being like completely within it's not completely within my control, but like having that sense of self that like, yeah, we did this and we're doing quite well. That has allowed me to kind of relieve myself of that. And I can also just like, it's more the day-to-day interactions where I bring more of myself to those conversations. It's just so much more natural and relationships are everything at the end of the day. So I find that to be, I don't know, it never will be 100%, but I can see the power of doing it. So.
Yeah. And a nice segue into our sponsor. You said relationships are everything, and that's really our sponsor, Darley. And, you're an entrepreneur, a new company. They've been around over 100 years, and they help our U.S. military and first responders, all over the globe, and equip people for success. And Jim and I talk about them all the time off record, how lucky we are to have an organization that supports, us studying leaders because they're in the same boat. They're trying to figure out how do they select, develop, and grow leaders to grow their company. So if you want to learn more about this great company, you can at darley.com. That's DARLEY.com.
Yeah. Great discussion. And, I want to harken back to the discussion we had earlier in the year, Katie, because you're one of these, young professionals that just had a ton of success. You go to grade school, you go to BCG, you have this big commercial success, you go start your own company. But like, so there's a lot of reasons why you should have been like super confident in yourself. And then you go into your first pitch and you get hammered. Like you get hammered. Tell us about like what happened there and like what allowed you to bounce back.
Oh gosh, I'm not sure exactly which one you're referencing. If you could refresh my memory. I know exactly what you're talking about. Sorry. Just took me a moment. I buried the trauma so deep that it took me a moment to get there. And yeah, this was a pitch where, again, early days, I had made like very first prototypes of Harken. And I was on the stage presenting in front of, I mean, gosh, I don't know how many hundreds of people as a competition to get into a major retailer. And, the first guy after giving this presentation, which went pretty well, the first person tasted and was just like, nope, I don't like it. This doesn't taste good. And I'm just, as you can imagine, mortified. I couldn't have gone to the airport faster. I'm like crying in the cab on the way back to the airport. And the great full circle thing about that moment is that we actually are now, as of a few months ago, we have launched nationwide in that retailer. We got to the right people. We've obviously refined the formula and they now love the product. But that was a low moment. That was definitely one of those like, oh, what am I doing? I don't have a salary. I have poured a whole lot of time, money, and energy into this. And is this going to work out? And really, it was just listening to, friends and family and my husband, who could not be more supportive, to remind me, like, why did I start this in the first place? And is one person's taste buds, are they really going to hold you back from really following your dreams?
Yeah. I was kind of interested because you mentioned something that I just love for you to expound on. Like you were kind of intentional about the people you surrounded yourself with and who you got feedback from and how you went about getting feedback. Wasn't just like you weren't in an echo chamber. You really, I think, valued that. And this gets back to, I think, maybe your scientific kind of mind, which is like, hey, I need to get the feedback to improve this thing. And I need to have the right people with the right opinions. I mean, like that intentionality really struck me as one of the more mature things I've ever heard from any executive.
Thank you. I appreciate that. No, I mean, it's hard, right? Because if you go up to somebody and say, hi, like, this is my life's work, try it. Do you like it? How likely is that person going to say they don't like it, right? There's no way you're going to get honest feedback in that environment. And so what I always do when we do tastings or what have you, I don't really care what people say. I watch and see, like, are they going back to take a second bite? Because they don't have to, right? It wouldn't be rude not to take a second bite. And so I'm always very careful to see if people's behavior equates to what they're saying, because I think that really tells you a lot more.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So, I really applaud you and commend you. Like now you've got this commercial success. You're back in that store nationwide that, had given you the original kind of, negative response. What is kind of the leadership lesson you would love to have like people draw away from your experiences here? Because, you've been at the high highs, the low lows, and back to the high highs again. What's the kind of thing that you'd say like, wow, like there's one thing you want to walk away, like, remember this.
Listen, I think it's listen more than you talk. I think we are not taught that as much as we should be, at least. You will always get a lot more from really hearing people than you're ever going to get from talking at them. And I think that is true whether you are at a Fortune 50 company, if you're in an early stage startup, you have to listen more than you talk.
Yeah. We had Margaret Heffernan on, a few months ago, and she talked about her latest book, Uncertainty. And we know, especially in the space you play, I mean, things shift quick. I mean, just, I heard on the news today, what are the companies doing to change the dies? And, I mean, there's things just shifting left and right. How do you, what have you learned about leading through uncertainty, and knowing when to double down versus when to quit, pivot,
Yeah.
change?
Yeah. You know, for us, and this is something that we've started to do as a company, and I did not create this. I stole this from Southwest Airlines, actually. Is a framework. It's called like the 7 questions framework, I believe. And we use that a lot. Like we'll do an offsite, we'll talk through it. And the way it works is, there are 4 of the 7 questions, right? Why do we exist? How do we behave? What do we do? How do we succeed? Those don't change, right? Like that's not changing every month, every quarter in response to the market. That's about who are you as a company and what are your core values. The other 3 questions as a part of the 7 questions do change as needed. And those are, what are we driving towards in, 1 to 5 years? What is the most important thing to focus on right now? And what do we need to do from a role and responsibility standpoint? So for me, it's about keeping your core values and making sure that runs through every decision that you're making. But how you do it and what you do when is what's going to change.
Yeah. Well, so many organizations Jim and I work with that they don't run their decision criteria through their core values. They kind of do a T-chart and pros and cons, good, bad, green, red, go, no go. How do you make sure that you have the discipline to do that? Because normally, there's a ton of fires to put out, and this requires, basically taking a step back and slowing things down.
Yeah, it does. I think you have to be aware of that. Nothing makes me happier than when a person on my team says like, wait a minute, let's like really think about this through the lens of those values. And you just, if you get in the habit of it, right, every single time, it just becomes second nature. And to me, yes, I think people are so focused on getting to things quickly, they don't realize how much time they actually lose in the process. Right, whether it's committing to make a new product that we're not really sure is going to work. Gosh, the amount of time, money, and energy you're going to burn on that. You could have just been focusing on your core. It feels good to get things done quickly, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll get to your end goal faster.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's hard to stay focused.
Yeah, no, I mean, you've got a fascinating story, and we've talked a lot about the business or you and stuff like that. But I'm really curious as a leader. We've talked about people. We've talked about the purpose and tying those two together to build the culture you want. Tell us a little bit about like your evolution of thinking about people, purpose, and culture over time, and like how you're making sure that you cement that the way you want it to be with Harken, because that's more than just a business. That's almost like this. It's you, tell us a little bit about like what you're doing to really solidify that.
I think at our stage, right, we're still very early. It's about hiring the right people. They say the fish rots from the head down. It, if those initial hires aren't right, and not necessarily do they have the skills or the executing correctly, do they really believe in what we're doing here? And do they use those values to really drive every decision they make? If they don't have it, it's not going to happen because I can only be in so many places at once. So I think that's really key. And then they'll hire people that have those same things and like really going through that because, I think culture is what happens when I'm not in the room. And that's what I'm focused on, making sure, carries on throughout the entirety of Harken's life here.
Mhm. Yeah, I think, one of the other things that's just kind of interesting too is, I was just talking to the young executive today about delegation and, time management and all these other things. And, I think nothing teaches you time management better than being a parent. If you thought you were busy before you were a parent, it's like, just wait. It's gonna, you don't know a level of busy and being tired that you're about to walk into. how has like building this team and, being an entrepreneur and also at the same time being a parent, like, eh, you know, what is the key to making sure that you, um, I hate the term like balance because being an entrepreneur is very imbalanced, but like, how do you, manage to keep focus and, being present at the right time for the right things?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. I certainly don't have the magic formula here for that. It's something that I certainly struggle with every day. Um, I do think, obviously, being a parent takes a lot of time and energy, but I find that people in the workplace who are parents, they understand prioritization in a way that it's like almost impossible to teach if you haven't gone through that life experience. Um, and they're so effective with their time, right? Like they're like, anything I can do to get more time with my kid is so high value to me. And so let's automate things. Let's figure out how we can, get to quicker processes. Um, and I mean, the other piece of it too is just like being present in everything that you do, right? Like I'm not just going to show up to a meeting because it's on my calendar. It's like, do I really need to be there? Can I add value? And being proactive about it. I think people fall into a rhythm of, well, we always do this way, and use that mindset of my time is my most valuable resource, not only to myself personally, but to the company. And if everybody's operating that way, nobody's duplicating tasks, you can get so much more done in a typical work day than if, you're not operating with that mentality. So,
No. What was just out of curiosity, I'm always interested in this kind of stuff. Is like, okay, you know, high level executive before you were a parent, high level executive now an entrepreneur as a parent. Um, what do you look back on and go, gosh, I really like this was something that's like I just totally didn't comprehend like until I became a parent. Like if I could go back and rewind the clock, I'd probably do this a little bit differently.
yeah, I think it comes back to like spinning on things too long, you don't have that absolute, I have to pick up my kid at daycare every day. That doesn't change. And what I have found is taking that pause actually allows me to process things much better. And it having that breather, I think I just make better decisions. And so whether or not you have kids, right? You can say, okay, at this point in the day, I'm absolutely going to take even if it's just an hour break, like go for a walk, go have a cup of coffee, go do whatever kind of rejuvenates you. And, the brain really can process in the back sometimes better than it can in the front. And, and I encourage all people to spend the time on that.
Katie, as I'm processing our conversation, in my mind's eye goes to it's like Katie at all these forks in the road. And Katie's on a really good path, and then Katie decides to take a harder, more unpredictable path. And it's like, I mean, that's what my mind's eye. It's like things were going good. It would have been easy for you to just go stay on the comfortable. Um, anyway, that's my big takeaway is, again, wondering, how come people like you decide to do that and other people stay on that,
Apart
And-
from mental illness, I don't know, but
well, I think, I mean, it's part of one of the, Gino Wickman, who wrote Traction, would say it's a key component of entrepreneurs. You're willing to take risks.
yeah.
Um, so, again, I would love for you to close out today by, addressing not people, Jim and my age, but people your age, and because everybody's struggling with, am I making the right decisions? I'm in a transition. I got kids. I don't have kids. Should I move? I mean, what would you say to people that are, at your stage in life as far as counsel, advice, suggestions, things to think about?
Gosh, I mean, I think what's always stood out to me is, and this is actually, I'm forgetting the um, author's name. But there's a theory in psychology that's, kind of divides the world into two different types of people. There's autonomy, mastery, purpose people, and then there's status, wealth, power position people. know what motivates you. And it sounds like, oh, one's good and one's bad. It's not. Like if you are a SWP person, they call it Southwest Power, own that and know that that's what you should be focusing on. Use that lens, know who you are, and use that to make the next decision. So I've always been in autonomy, mastery. Like I have to know every little detail to feel comfortable about something. Purpose, obviously, and follow whichever one really aligns with who you are inside, not who you want people to think you are, but who you actually are. And that's what's going to lead you to the best outcome for yourself, for your family, for your partner. Because when there's like a dissonance there, I think that's when people make decisions that they wind up, not being so happy that they made later down the road.
That's awesome.
Outstanding counsel. Great advice. I just love your story, and I love the humility with which you approach it. Thank you for being on the show, Katie. We really enjoyed our time together.
Yeah, absolutely. This is really fun. Thank you for having me.
For our listeners, that's all we have for you this week. We'll include ways for you to connect with Katie in our show notes, so make sure to visit us at theleadershippodcast.com and subscribe to us on YouTube. And just a little shout out to Mark Palmieri, who's been pinging me on my phone for the past 45 minutes.
Noble American.
Glorious human, yeah. And to close out, remember, if there is no struggle, there is no progress. Frederick Douglass. It's a wrap.
Thanks for listening to the Leadership Podcast. To listen to more shows or to access the books and content discussed on this show, be sure to visit theleadershippodcast.com. The material in this podcast is copyright by Rafti Advisors and Self-Reliant Leadership and must have written approval before commercial application.